You started on a process to map the state and figure out which areas are best for agriculture, which areas are best for mining, be it extractive ones or coal seam gas. Why did you change that process? And what would the Labor Party do now in terms of the broad brush of deciding where agriculture and mining will go? On drought, a lot of people are very concerned about the process you're taking now in deciding who's in and who's out. So you're going to stick with the 1 in 50 years criteria, and what will be the Labor Party's
well, let's
policy?
limit this at 3.
So yeah, that's 3.
Okay, go 3.
Native veg.
Okay, native veg.
Mapping the state.
Mapping the state and drought.
And
sorry, what's the question on drought?
And drought. Will you stay with that 1 in 50 years criteria? Because obviously there are some that can't prove that. And what will the Labor Party do?
Okay, so can we just work backwards?
Yes.
Okay, so drought, we've got a fantastic policy there. The Farm Innovation Fund, $250 million accessible from, from the date that we made the announcement. So it's not an election policy, it's just where we are. $250 million over 5 years for the Farm Innovation Fund. Very popular. That's low interest loans, 2.5% for a 20-year period. So I was actually in Tamworth the other day and talking to a shed supplier, and I walked in and I said, "Do you know about the Farm Innovation Fund?" He said, "If it hadn't been for the Farm Innovation Fund, I wouldn't have sold 6 sheds in the last month, and I'd be in serious trouble." So the Farm Innovation Fund is a great thing. You can borrow up to $250,000 per project and up to $500,000 per farm. You can combine it with another loan, so if you need $1 million, you can use $250,000, a low interest loan out of the RAA, and get your other $750,000 from your regular bank. So that's one. The second thing, emergency water infrastructure rebate.
Okay. I'm conscious that we're going to run out of time.
Well, these are big questions.
I know, I understand that.
But I need to get through this. So the 1 in 50 applies to the emergency water infrastructure rebate, not the Farm Innovation Fund. Farm Innovation Fund, you can access at any time. You don't need to be in drought. You could be having a boom time. You can get it from anywhere around the state, but you've got to go through the RAA. So emergency water infrastructure rebate follows on from a very successful program that we introduced last year. There's $20 million in that pot. You can claim a rebate of up to $20,000. You have to be in a 1 in 50 year flood according to the BOM model. Right. We've got other parts of our drought package out there as well, $45 million over 5 years for education. You can use that for business plans if you want to.
Katrina, can I just leave it there?
Okay.
I'm just going to give Steve, I'm going to give Steve a chance on drought. No, let's do drought first. Let's get drought out of the way, because you've actually been very critical of the government's
extremely critical of the fact that.
But can I just refer back to this question, which was the 1 in 50? Yeah. So we need to come back to that part of it, I think.
And there is a number of aspects of drought policy, which that is one. The Labor Party would reintroduce drought declaration for a start. We believe that's important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's actually important for a public knowledge reason, so that people actually understand where people are in trouble around our state. It's very difficult to make historical comparisons on the basis of the figures the government is currently giving or the information the government is giving. And that's important because farmers need to get the rest of the community supporting them when they're in trouble. We would reintroduce some forms of in-drought support. We would certainly continue to do drought preparation, of which the things which Katrina was talking about are part. Let's be very clear about loans. $250 million worth of loans is not $250 million worth of expenditure from the state government. It's a subsidy on interest rates which they pay.
No, should it be? Well, should the taxpayer pay?
So when you say it's a $300 million package, it's far from that.
$327.5 million.
It's actually, it's nowhere near that because the government isn't spending that money.
But your point is that farmers go into debt to get...
So what happens is, at the moment, if you go up to the north of the state, we've got farmers who are seriously in debt getting stock food at the moment. There is no way they will be accessing the innovation loans. They simply can't afford it. So at the moment, the people who can afford to access those low interest loans are the people who are doing reasonably well. That's my problem with the current government's programs. It's not a new program to be doing the infrastructure work. Most of the work on the of capping and piping was done by the Labor government previously. A lot of these things aren't new, they've just got different names.
Okay, can we hold that one there? Hold that one there because we've got the CSG map. You made your point?
Sure.
You're happy? Yep. Okay, CSG mapping, you were starting it.
I can't respond to that?
No, well, we can do that in the round at the end. Okay. We do need to get through these questions. And I notice, we still have a line-up here, so we could be here till 4 o'clock. Keep going, sorry, CSG map.
Oh, the agriculture impact statements?
So no, mapping. You were mapping the state.
Yeah, so the state was mapped. It had never been done before, and it was a very, very complicated and tough process to do. And they're continually trying to refine those maps as well. It's not the sort of thing that you can just do overnight, despite the government saying do this overnight, DPI. It actually took a lot longer than that. So, and as I said, this was we had a blank slate starting this off. So we had 5 ministers in a room. Okay, let's see how we can do this to make a process that is good for agriculture, doesn't result in a negative for agriculture, but also doesn't turn off industry investment in this state. And that's really important. I mean, we started from a very low base. We had the lowest business confidence of all the states and territories here in New South Wales when we took over when we won government. We've now got one of the highest, if not the highest, level of business confidence. And it's really important that we don't sell a negative message out there.
So, Katrina,
we get it right.
Sorry, but the question was, why did you stop the map?
No, the maps are still there.
So the maps are still there. You're still mapping.
They're part of the gateway process.
Oh, okay. There you go.
The agriculture impact statement.
That's fine.
You've stopped that process and handed it over to planning, and now it becomes the economic driver becomes the most important. So, as I understand it, you actually have stopped that process.
Planning is now the lead ministry for it, and that was, I mean, all of these things had to be sorted out during the process. So, at one stage there was going to be concurrence with all. It was a mess for a while, but you know we came through it, and it did take 2 or 3 years to get there. But I think that the gateway process that we have now gives the certainty to the industry that's needed, and we all know where we are.
Okay, so to avoid repeating your points about the gateway, which you've already done,
I won't talk about those.
Yeah,
Katrina makes a lot of statements in her comments that are about the way the state of the state when she came to government. Most of those are completely out of her imagination.
That's not true.
They're ridiculous statements, but we haven't got time for me to go point by point and go through them.
I'll come back tomorrow.
Anybody can go back to 2000.
You are right. The government did map some areas, but then stopped. It hasn't continued mapping into other areas. So you are right. The mapping process has stopped at a point that it was at. What Labor's said on coal seam gas is that we would have a pause, a moratorium, while we see the science done. And that the most important part of that is the work that the chief scientist has set out with actually getting good knowledge of our aquifers, so that we have well-mapped aquifers as the first priority to know where we're actually going to be drilling and what impact that is likely to have. That work was originally proposed by the last federal government. To their credit, the current government in New South Wales has decided it is doing that work, and Labor is keen to see that happening. It is a critical baseline.
The has done some amazing work in that area.
So to your first question, again, can you just remind everyone?
Native veg. So native veg.
So what's the point, though? Let's just get them to the
It's really just to outline what your approach is, because I understand that there has been a long inquiry into it. There are some recommendations. The recommendations, as I understand, are to scrap what's currently there and start again. And so I'm just interested to know whether you will do that, and if not, if the Labor Party is in power, what you will do.
Good question.
Okay, so State Environment Planning Policy number 46 came into play in 1995 with Bob Carr. They introduced it, then became the Native Vegetation Act, and obviously was of great concern to a lot of farmers right around New South Wales. Look, it does fall under the environment portfolio. I'm not the Minister for Native Veg, but obviously I take a keen interest in it. And it has been the bane of a lot of farmers' existence, particularly in some of those broader acreage areas. We've had to work through this very methodically and systematically. We are at a position now where there has been quite a sensible report issued, of which the government has accepted. The government will make an announcement. Have we announced this yet?
I know, anyway, go ahead and do it.
It's not my portfolio.
We're all friends here, it's okay.
But look, we are landing in a very good place there, and I know that it's taken a long time, but we've had to make sure that we've gone through the process correctly and properly, which I believe that we have done, and there will be some major changes in this area.
There we go.
The issues that are raised in that report, particularly with practicalities of people dealing with the legislation, and there's an important issue raised in the report that the current system is stopping people from doing crop rotation, which would be, pasture rotation, which helps them to actually get more ground cover and better management of pasture. Those are important things to carry through. But we need to be very clear that the report itself, which the government commissioned, says that there is still dangers and there is still loss occurring of native vegetation and native wildlife. It's saying that we still need to be doing the job. It's just saying to write a new piece of legislation to do it. Well, frankly, the name of the legislation doesn't matter. It's what's in it that matters. And if we go into an entire rewrite process now, I suspect we would be still talking about it in 4 years' time, given the record the government's got in rewriting legislation. And I very much doubt that we will see, despite what National Party members might be saying in debates around the country, that we will see Rob Stokes and the Premier willing to scrap native vegetation protection, and in that they'll be consistent with Labor.
Thank you. Tara, we'll just leave that there because I really
want... just said that we're slow with legislation. What about the Sandwiches and Crematoria Act? What about the Biosecurity Act? What about the Local Land Services Act?
You haven't passed the Biosecurity Act.
What about the Marine Estate Management Act?
You didn't bring it on.
So, actually, Sean, you're going up for your second go. I'm actually interested in Fiona. No, I'm not interested in you. Oh, come on. The journalists don't have any wisdom. Come on. Sean, ask the question.
He's a real farm rider.
All right, come. Quick.
Just look.
Sorry. I beg your pardon.
On the strategic. So look, on the ag industry action plan that you've got, just interested in tangible outcomes. So what money has been budgeted or will go into it, and what would be your priorities if you entered office in the next term, and for Mr. Whan, what your alternative would be.
Okay, so the Ag Industry Action Plan is a high-level document. It's basically a way forward. It's the government's approach to agriculture. We've got 7 industry action plans across a broad variety of agencies in New South Wales. And it's very important that we know where we're going with all of our important agencies when it comes to industry, when it comes to investment, when it comes to making sure that we've got food plans and viability for the industry into the future. So this hadn't been done before. There hadn't been a business plan for agriculture, and I'm really pleased that this has been put together. When I came into the portfolio, I replaced 22 committees with one, called the Primary Industries Ministerial Advisory Committee, and it's made up of industry leaders from across a broad variety of different parts of the agriculture and fisheries and environmental sector. So that is a fantastic brains trust for me. They're the ones that put together the Agriculture Industry Action Plan, and that was, of course, that then went before government and it was approved by government to go forward. So we've got an ambitious plan which sees each sector increasing in value as the years progress and a way forward. They're basically everything that we do now in some way will relate to that Agriculture Industry Action Plan.
Okay, thank you for that. Steve?
I hope that everyone in the room has read the Agriculture Industry Action Plan, because you will then see, as I have, that it is an extremely generic and very superficial piece of work. It doesn't commit the government to specific goals and targets with actual processes and plans to fit them, and in a lot of cases it simply endorses existing areas. What I would do, if I'm Minister again, is focus very strongly on developing a plan about exporting to Asia, which deals with specific commodities, with specific products, and with working with the producers of those products to actually get those export plans for each product. Very much like I've proposed and announced in the past for the dairy industry, where we'd work with specific industries, and the aim of that wouldn't just be to produce more product, it would be to process and package more in regional New South Wales, producing more jobs. I want specific plans that work with industry and not just a nice sounding superficial plan.
Okay, that's great. Fiona, you've been...
Thanks very much. Look, there's lots of nitty-gritty policy issues that I'd love to get my fingers into, but I'll keep my question nice and broad. With less and less people in rural and regional New South Wales these days, that means less and less voices in Parliament and less representatives in Parliament. Some of the problems that we've had with some of our biggest policy asks around native vegetation, land and water and drought, we are told is because of the status of the junior coalition partner or because of the upper house power. Clearly, it's not just the agriculture ministers that we need on our side, that we in rural and regional New South Wales and we in agriculture need on our side. Clearly, it's a whole of government that we need on our side. Clearly, the whole of government must be behind agriculture. What commitments can you give as agriculture ministers that in the next government, the next government will be putting agriculture up front and centre and recognise it as one of the biggest contributors to this state's GDP?
Can I ask Steve to answer that one first, just to mix it up a little bit?
Yeah, and good question, because I have often pointed out to people that that if you have domination by the city, you're going to get domination of the policy agenda by the city, and we do see that frequently.
You see that in your party?
And we see that in government frequently, but certainly it is, and very bluntly, you need to have representatives from both sides of politics coming from regional New South Wales so that you're getting a more bipartisan approach. At the moment, We don't have many country Labor members of Parliament, and that means that it is hard to put